Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show. It's so nice to see you again.
Hi, Ella. Nice to see you, really. Great to be here with you again and talk to you about relationships.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm really glad that we managed to find time to meet again and discuss this really important topic, which is couples therapy and the topic of improving and transforming relationships. So maybe I'll start off by asking you for a short introduction. And if you could tell me a few words about who usually comes to see you in your practice as well.
Mhm. So usually I'm seeing people who are having relational difficulties, and it can be either individual or a couple that is coming for therapy, and they are seeking to resolve usually some particular problem that is related, as I said before, to their relationship.
Mm,
And during the course of therapy, sometimes I would say even very often, they go a bit deeper and understand that there are different layers of these difficulties that they are having,
mm,
and understanding that it may come from even from their childhood,
yeah,
yeah,
sure,
or previous relationships with other people in their life.
sure. So is it men and women that you see, and is it couples as well as individual people?
Mhm. Yeah, both sexes, yeah, both
Mhm.
genders, and people who are also identifying in a different way.
Sure.
The problem is that very often men are not so eager
Yeah.
to use psychotherapy. Usually, this
Mm,
is quite cultural problem. They are not willing to use help because of the way how they were also raised by parents. You know, men, little boys. They
mm,
are taught to be strong, not to cry, not to show
sure.
feelings, to sort out things on their own, or to be the leader. And it's very hard for them to actually admit that they are having any kind of difficulty
Yeah.
with their emotional life.
Yeah.
But most of the clients are really statistically women. And usually this is the woman who is like
Starting the process.
starting the process
Yeah.
of a
Mm,
couple therapy.
sure. Well, hopefully things will change, or I think things are already changing a little bit, and different organizations in the society, different communities take an active role in breaking this mental health stigma
Yeah.
that we are all exposed to. And indeed, from my own experience, I know that the men I know have been very much raised believing they should be strong, they should never show their weak sides, and they've got everything under control.
Yes.
And they really have problem admitting that they are struggling with something.
Mm.
And as you know, and I know, unfortunately, relationship problems is not something anybody ever wants to boast about, or even openly admit. And I, like you said, I do think women and men deal with those problems differently.
Yeah.
So I think women perhaps are a little bit more open um, in sharing their problems with friends and family, and look for advice, look for different sources of help,
Mm.
self-help, and so on. And men tend to be a little bit more um, perhaps not so open about it, but I think they're slowly opening up as well, which is very promising. And tell me, what type of issues? So you've mentioned the childhood. So I understand loads of our issues actually depend on what type of childhood we had. So much depends on that quality of our childhood. Can you explain a little bit why that is? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Um, Basically, we are all relational beings. And from the moment of birth, and even in the womb of mother, you are having relationship with your mom.
Yeah.
You are like somehow are surrounded by the energy by the hormones, everything what's going on in mom's body and mind somehow affects the child. For example, the stress when mom is pregnant can somehow affect the baby as well,
Yeah.
already in the womb. Then after the birth, during birth, and then obviously the first relationship, how your needs were met when you
Yeah.
actually were a little baby, when you were an infant. Did your mother actually cared for you? Was she good enough mom? Was she meeting all your needs?
Was she perhaps
Yeah,
in tune with what you needed the most as a
yeah,
child, right?
yes. Was she, for example, not frustrated so much because of her own difficulties in relationship, for example, where she was not feeling safe or well
Yeah.
uh, during this first month? So this all affects like you very much how you relate to people from early moments of your life on earth, actually,
Mm-hmm.
from the relationship from your mom with your mom, but
Yeah.
obviously later when you start forming closer bonds or not with your parents when you're a bit
Mm-hmm.
older, like 1 year old, 2 year old. These are very formative years for children.
Mm.
And then as adults, sometimes we regress to these moments of life and feel very vulnerable.
Yeah. And it usually takes us a long time to realize that
Mm,
the things we are not happy with in our adult life, the answer to that is in our childhood.
yeah.
And I find, from my work and my friends, my private life and professional life, I know that sometimes it takes us far too long to realize what is really going on and
Mm,
why that is. But let's talk a little bit more about those issues that people come to you with. So, you mentioned relationship issues, marriage, couples, but is there a pattern? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it low mood? Is it general life dissatisfaction? What do
mm,
you see in your work? What is the most common theme that's coming through?
mm. Yeah, most people are coming when they are feeling very low. So it's the different level of depression that they are going through at the moment. It can be just low mood, or it can be already something clinical, like
Hmm.
depression or anxiety. And because they were waiting for so long, like repressing their feelings, that
Yeah,
it grows and they cannot bear it anymore.
yeah.
So basically, I know, imagine that your tooth is aching and you're waiting until this pain really becomes unbearable. And then it's even more pain when you have to do something about that.
Yeah. And what is the reason why people wait so long with regards to improving their relationship? Why do you think that is?
I think they will manage to do things on their own. Sometimes the stigma that you mentioned about the way how you've been raised as well,
Mm,
that you don't want to seek help,
mm.
or
You
you
think
think,
you think you can manage it on your own, or perhaps some people think that if you ignore it, it will just go away, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely. Like many people just try not to think about that.
And what seems to be the most common thing you observe when it comes to what goes wrong in relationships? Can you give us like a three,
Mm,
perhaps points that you see as a most common pattern? What goes wrong in relationships
mhm,
where they fail?
mm. So after the first period that you are infatuated, usually with another person, now there comes another period when you start being a bit disenchanted, and you can start seeing the person as they are, like with all
Yeah,
their flaws, with all these maybe little things that can be very annoying for you in a daily life.
yeah,
And then it's like when people start seeing the real other, sometimes they are not able to accept that.
okay,
Um, Also, when people start getting to know each other better, they realize that they may have different values, different opinions, different
mm,
ways of living that they want, different lifestyle that they want to lead. and it also gets them to conflicts, to arguments. Um, it would be much easier if people got to know themselves better before forming very intimate, close relationships.
Mm.
Because when you add this intimacy to the thought, it really starts being very, very emotional when you disagree with each other.
Mm. And I just want to highlight what you said there. You said get to know themselves,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Not get to know the other person.
yeah,
And I think this is super crucial for people to hear right in this conversation. This is probably the single most important point in this conversation, which is building and forming connection with yourself, maintaining that connection with yourself, getting to know yourself, getting to know your values,
yeah,
what's important to you and why, and not just completely ignore that. So I think what we probably see, I certainly was one of these people, I have to admit. Um, I was one of these people that thought I knew myself. And that was and that was literally until I had a child.
mm,
When I became a mom, I realized, well, first of all, I had an identity crisis, which many women have. So I completely lost myself, and I had to find myself again, quite literally, as a person, as a woman. Uh,
it can also rock your relationship during this
Oh,
time very much.
100%. And I think that is where um it's adding exactly that factor that's adding fuel to the fire, right? Between people is when they have a child, um everything changes. Everything changes. They become a different person whether they like it or not. So especially women become a different person, and men, or the other side in relationship, in all types of relationships these days, uh, might feel a little bit like they're not important anymore. There is suddenly this huge responsibility of earning much more money to
Yeah,
provide for the family. There's this huge pressure to support the mother, and sometimes it might feel like whatever you do, it's not good enough.
mm,
So there's this huge frustration in men, I think, as well. I've seen that in my husband, when we had our son, and um, I really saw that later on when I felt my mental health has improved significantly, and I established myself again as a
mm.
new person after I came to terms with motherhood. I realized how hard it is for men, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation, especially now. No matter how hard they work or how many hours, they still are expected to take care of the child, to take care of the household duties.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like we are both expected to do a lot because usually we do not have that much help from other people. Like families have
Exactly.
to deal on their own with children now. It was a bit different
Yeah.
years ago, but the situation changed, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a huge pressure on both. Plus, as you said, changing identity to
Yeah.
become mom, to become dad, having much more responsibilities, and then
Mm.
even clashing values or
Yeah.
clashing needs or clashing idea how to raise your child.
Mm.
It can be really really difficult in
Yeah.
a relationship.
Yes. And what would you say is the biggest? So, we've already said that what really helps in building a supportive relationship, supportive connection, is to first have a connection with yourself, to
Yes.
first get to know yourself, establish what is it that you want in life and
Mhm.
why, and do that as much as possible before you have children.
Ideally, yeah.
Ideally, exactly, which doesn't happen very often for many of us. But what would you say are the biggest roadblocks that people need to overcome, in order to improve that, their relationship or their marriage?
Mhm. When they are already in a relationship,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's this self-knowledge for sure, which is not easy task, especially when you're having a lot of responsibilities and you are focusing on reality. You sometimes may not even have the moment to sit down, to
Yeah.
think about yourself and your needs. Like life is very fast
Mm,
now nowadays, and it's really difficult for modern people to find time for like some kind of meditation, for journaling,
yeah,
for thinking about who you really are, what you need, what's important for you, and be curious not only about yourself but about your partner as well, who he
exactly.
really is and what he really needs, what he wants,
Mm,
and how we can live this life together so both our like main goals are met, purposes in life.
sure. And so I understand that, but what about so you said curiosity about the other person, but what about the unfinished business from childhood? So we mentioned in our podcast episode, recent podcast episode, does couple therapy work?
Yeah.
And also in the previous one about the codependency that we recorded together, we mentioned that there is this thing that you call unfinished business, and that refers to our childhood. Can you give me an example how our childhood
Mm.
experiences can hold us back in building happy relationships or
Mm.
maintaining
Yeah.
relationships?
So basically, this lack of awareness means that like, you or your partner or both of you are not completely conscious the patterns of your behavior that are connected to your childhood.
Mm,
So let's say your partner or you had a really difficult relationship with your mom or dad,
yeah,
and your needs were not met in this relationship.
yeah,
You were neglected somehow, or what worse, abused somehow emotionally,
yeah.
criticized harshly. It doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
physical abuse, but sometimes emotional abuse can be even more painful for a child in this situation. These
Definitely.
words stay for life in your head. And if you are not realizing that this can affect your relationship now, you can like have these patterns of, for example, expecting from your partner to take care of you like he's your dad, because your dad never taken care of you properly, or
Mm,
the other way around, like your partner, for example, got very critical mom, and somehow you are similarly constantly criticizing him.
sure. So
um yeah.
what I think what you're trying to say is that what you're saying is that we build our we use our subconscious mind to build our belief system,
Yeah.
and that belief system starts forming from our childhood. So we
Yes.
believe different things based on what we observe in our parents, our grandparents, our siblings, and the behaviors that we are exposed to as children, we save as a template in our subconscious mind.
Yes.
And then what
Until we will understand that,
until we
until we will
understand
bring this
how
to the
they harm
conscious.
us, right? How they prevent us from leading a happy life.
Yeah.
And then we go through that, some of us go through that challenge of changing those beliefs and changing those, this belief system um, and those patterns of behavior, perhaps, or
Mm.
those templates that we store in our mind.
Yes.
So would you say that, simplifying, would you say that however we were treated by our mom or dad, we would sort of expect that from our partner, and we would have that response, we would give the same response to that behavior that we did as a child? Is that
Yeah,
true?
sometimes we are completely recreating what was going on in our house. So
Wow.
these are similar dramas, similar communication
Mm,
difficulties. So whatever was happening and what you've learned, how your parents were talking to each other and to you, what they taught you about, as you said,
yeah,
yourself, who you are, how the world is, and how other people are.
yeah,
Is the world safe place? Are you good enough? Or maybe you are not. You have to like work very hard to deserve love from your parents. They don't love you for who you are, etc., etc. So then when you are meeting your partner, it's somehow you choose him
Mm.
based on this pattern,
Yeah.
and somehow you are connected to this person because you know this, and
Yeah.
it is somehow something that is drawing you to him,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're drawn to your partner because it's something that you know
So
well.
so perhaps you have this motivation to fix this unfinished business.
Yes, exactly,
So
exactly.
how whoever mistreated you in your childhood, whoever was dismissive towards you, whoever didn't react and met your needs, whether it was grandpa, grandma, mom, dad,
Yeah.
um, you are you are now transferring that to your partner. So would you say, Anna, that the first step to cure or transform any relationship is to build self-awareness?
Yes,
and
definitely.
and would you say that second step from that is to get to know yourself, or you could say that's part of the same step, but get to know yourself and get to know what truly is important to you in your personal life, in your love life, and
Yes.
what you can and what you can't live without in that partner, and then um, go into an open and honest communication and learn how to communicate your needs effectively,
Yes, definitely.
including building boundaries. Would you say that's the way to go?
Yeah, definitely. So first, as you said, when you realize who you are, when you understand yourself more, what formed you, who you are at the moment. So when you get this
Yeah,
consciousness,
yeah,
then you can start like learning about the proper ways of communication, because you may realize that you have so many deficits from the past.
yeah.
You are, for example, in your 30s, and you realize that emotionally you were on the level of, I don't know, 10-year-old little scared or
Mm-hmm.
girl.
Yeah.
And then you realize that you've never learned how to properly communicate to people, to not to nag, to not to criticize, to ask for your needs to be met, how to do that in a relationship to not to harm someone else. Like, so you start learning proper communication, and you start learning also forming boundaries whilst doing that. So you communicate what you want, um, whilst you are
How do we form though? Tell me about those boundaries, because this is, I think, this is so crucial. And again, we spoke about this earlier. We all need to learn how to form boundaries in our relationships in order to be happy. I think
yeah.
it's fair to say that. So how do we form those boundaries? Where do we start?
It happens all together. It's like you cannot start from forming boundaries if you don't know yourself, if you don't know what
Mm.
you want, what your values, what your goals are, what your
Mm-hmm.
purpose in life is. It's very hard to form this. If you
Yeah.
are feeling very low, if you are not feeling that you are good enough, if you don't like yourself, if you criticize yourself. So if you are treating yourself badly, you somehow cross your own boundaries.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
we need to build that confidence first. We need to build
Um,
positive self-esteem and self-belief.
Yeah, it happens all together. When you are doing that, at the same time, the boundaries are naturally start forming, and
Mm-hmm.
you naturally learn to speak about your needs and what you want and what you do not want. You learn to
Mm-hmm.
say no to yourself and to others.
Sure.
So, like, you stop hurting yourself,
Yeah.
like you stop like overworking.
Mm.
You give yourself time to rest. You do not let yourself to be harmed by your partner. Instead
Sure.
of going into arguments with him, you said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I want to think about that, and let's talk when there isn't so much heat of the moment. Let's calm down." And then you give yourself time to think,
Mm.
not to create like reactive situation between both of you.
Yeah.
So this is part of a self-care.
Correct. And I think it's worth to so I think we are all guilty of not maintaining our boundaries. Some of us don't have an idea what boundaries are. Some of us don't have a clue how to set them up. Many of us are lacking this connection with ourselves. And because we don't have that connection with ourselves, we don't understand our own needs very well. So we become, like you said, very reactive in situations where we first say yes to someone's request, and then we end up being or feeling resentful and
Yeah.
angry that we did say yes. And where in fact we could have done with saying no, because we don't have that time and we can't do that favor to our husband, our boyfriend, our mom, or our friends. And we really, most of us really need to learn more about setting boundaries. And I really want to encourage you all to listen to the podcast episodes of Virtually Unbreakable about boundaries and codependency, which we recorded with Anna before. But I think what I want to also summarize here is that I very often see that pattern in my female friends and sometimes in myself as well, because I'm an empath. I love helping people. I often feel that I need what the other person wants before they even say it.
Yeah.
And I go like above and beyond, trying to make them happy. I don't know why, I mean, I do, it's my nature, but I really have to
You
stop
know, Ella,
myself.
you
Yeah.
know, Ella, that it's crossing of the boundaries as well.
100%. 100%. This is why I'm saying it, because I just want to show, I want to inform our viewers and our listeners that this is something that happens to all of us. So you and me are not immune from that. We still have to practice our boundary setting. But it's all about the self-awareness, right? It's about building self-awareness.
Women are
So
so giving, as you say.